Hello, thanks for coming.
We decided to labelize the series 2022 with the red thread, Can Drama Be a Force for Good? Of course, it was obvious to invite Adam. I mean, his journey is such an inspiring travel around drama and creation, and his vision. I hope you have seen This Is Going to Hurt, or if you haven't, that you will. When Adam said yes, it was also obvious to ask Harold Amreld, director, member of the steering group of series, to be his interviewer. So welcome on stage, Adam Kay and Harold Amreld.
So, great. Bonjour, tout le monde. Ça va?
Très bien, merci. Can we switch to English now? I think that's the 5 French words I know.
Okay, then we're good. So, I'm really proud and happy to be here with Adam Kay. And we are going to talk about his creative life and his quantum leap. He has made a career. It took me 30 years to reach barely where he is now, and he done it in a couple of years. So I don't know how you did it, but we're going to talk about that a lot. And also about This Is Going to Hurt. Adam was a doctor for 6-7 years, something like that. And then he was also a comedian a little and wrote. But you wrote your diaries, and you picked up your diaries, and out of that came the book, This Is Going to Hurt, which is really both funny and gives a real insight how the British hospitals, NHS, work. And it has changed. I think it's, Adam is going to talk about this, but it's really, gives a really insight how it is to work as a doctor there. But he took all this experience and from his diaries, and he, from his own diaries, wrote the script to a TV series. And the book, the diaries, was sold in 2.5 million copies, maybe more now as we speak. And then also it's sold to 19 countries or something like that, or 30 now for the moment. I don't know. But it's a huge success. And so is the TV series, which is absolutely brilliant. It's funny, and it's full of blood and placenta and you name it. But it's also very touchy about things in life, both regarding your working life as a doctor, of course, and the stress and the situation of trying to save people's life, but also going into the personal life in a very touchy way, relating to this main character's parents and so forth. And also his husband and love in the series, which is really works really fine. So it's both sweet comedy and very salty and in a sense dark, but with hope in the end. So the question that I have to ask you, and that the first one, that is, you had this job as a doctor, and you know you're going to advance. You know you're going to have a great paycheck in the end, because the head of the clinic drives a Jaguar or whatever it was. And my wife is a doctor, and she's doing well. And if she should said I would like to go into the film business and leave my job as a doctor, I would say absolutely no. But you did it. Why?
I mean, it's normally my mother who asks me questions like that. I worked on labour ward. I was an obstetrician, and which is it's a very rewarding specialty. And what you want from every single case is a healthy mum and a healthy baby. And I was relatively senior into my training. I was a year or so from being a consultant, so the most senior level. And so I was the most senior doctor on the ward at this time, and I had a case where I ended up with neither a healthy mum nor a healthy baby. And I realized that I didn't have the emotional armor to deal with that. And I'd made the decision to be a doctor when I was a teenager, That's, in the UK, you start your medical training at 18, you need to do certain exams beforehand, you choose those subjects at 16. 16 is a very bad age to decide to do anything, let alone what you want to do for the next 40-odd years. And I certainly didn't have any idea about the impact of the job on a human being. I had an idea that it would involve blood and guts and life and death and tough hours, but I didn't. In physics, they teach you that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And Newton, or one of that lot, had this rule. And in medicine, an awful thing happens to a patient or family. It's never equal what comes back to you, but there is always an opposite. And I had the maximum that I could cope with. And so after this terrible shift at work, I stepped away. And I didn't know what else to do, because this was my plan since I was 16, or my parents' plan, whoever's plan it was. And the only other thing that I'd ever had any interest in was writing and performing funny things. And I'd always been writing down these diaries every day, which in retrospect was my coping mechanism for the bad stuff. No one taught me this is how you cope. So I wrote down the silly, the funny, the disgusting. And so when I left, I thought, I'll take 6 months out, give writing, performing a go. If that doesn't work, back to medicine, find another specialty, work in general practice, work in somewhere else. But as it happened, turns out I was better at the plan B than the plan A, and I'm stuck here.
I'm also from an academic family, and I started doing films when I was a teenager and went into it. I didn't go the academic career, and I'm the black sheep in the family. So you did the right thing, but then you became the black sheep, or were you the black sheep, or how did your parents cope with it? I know you have some other issues with them, in a sense, if I may ask.
They're speaking to me now. I don't have children, but I understand the concept of wanting the best for your children. And, I was from a family of doctors, and their idea of, a healthy, secure, happy, brilliant job was... So I'm one of four siblings, and in order it goes, our degrees were doctor, doctor, lawyer, doctor. And so that was just what was expected. My husband, his family are from a much more creative industry. His dad's an advertising executive, and they're producer, musician, producer. So it's, but that is what was the safe, secure, style of career in that family.
That's wonderful. And this morning we had people from Ukraine, and it's a terrible situation there, and one from Israel, who's based in Israel, and they talked about that trauma and war elicits creativity. Is that a point that might have happened with you, being on this ward and delivering all these, and having these strong feelings? Has that made you...
I think potentially. I think I've always had a creative kernel inside, but extremes precipitate coping mechanisms, and in medicine there is this long history of humor as a coping mechanism. And indeed, I was reading recently a book from a doctor who was a survivor of Auschwitz, who wrote about the humor of the concentration camp, which seems unthinkable, but clearly it precipitates during these sort of extreme moments, whatever they are, be it war or sort of much lower key trauma, such as on the in hospital wards.
And this I'll come to more how you did it and so forth. But originally, whose idea was it to make this into a TV series?
My bank manager.
Okay.
No, it was so the book had started to do quite well, and I think it's a standard conversation that that happens. Your agent says, "Oh, should we shop this around to to production companies?" And I'd been working in television a bit already, mostly just in the comedy side of things. I'd never approached anything like a drama, and an extraordinary thing happened. Various production companies were interested, and more than one broadcaster wanted to to show This Is Going to Hurt. And normally in my life, less than one broadcaster wants to show anything that I write. But there was something about it that caught the imagination. I mean, there are 20 million different TV shows about being a doctor, but this was a slightly different idea for two reasons. First of all, it was entirely truthful. Everything had literally happened. I mean, for television, I have to change various things so I don't go to prison or become excommunicated from all my friends and family. But it was all based on truth. It didn't shy away from being funny, but at the same time, didn't shy away from showing the awful side of things. And the final thing is, something I hadn't particularly seen in medical dramas before was the doctor back home. So I remember I was sitting at home watching, there was a show called Dr. Foster that was very big in England, brilliant show, about this GP who ends up, in a complicated relationship, sort of having to play detective, and I was watching it, and James said, there was a scene in a doctor's show, is that realistic? I was like, yes, that's really realistic, that's perfect. But how's this woman got time to, be a detective and have all these dinner parties? I want the show where a doctor comes home 3 hours late, covered in blood, or stays an extra shift, because in my memory, that's what it's like. There is, it has a huge impact on you as a human.
The thing with what you've done as a creator, I think is amazing, because if I were a producer, I'm going to ask, and someone's written a book, a diary, and can he write a script on this? And I would say, no way, it won't work. And I worked with other authors that have written novels that I've directed and co-written, but it's very difficult usually for a writer to change his novel into a film or TV series story, because you're so stuck in what you have. But this was actually a diary. So was that a help in a sense that it was not a structured arc, and then you could work with the arc, or?
Yeah, it was a help and a hindrance. My diary, if it was a direct adaptation, would have been a very strange one-man sketch show, very disjointed, all these little... My diary must be 200-300 separate little anecdotes. So it couldn't be a direct adaptation. And knowing that was freeing. It's not, I imagine, like if you're adapting a crime drama or something from a book, each chapter becomes the episode, each ends on a cliffhanger, and it feels satisfying like that. So I needed to reimagine it in lots of ways. And that was very freeing, because I could think, what story do I want to tell? Not what story is in the book. What's the bit of this that I want to lean into? And the bit of it I leant into, which is going to make the show sound absolutely dreary, but hopefully we found an interesting way in, is the mental health of healthcare professionals.
Yeah, and you've given out very much of your own personal life in a very strong way, and very a way that makes you like the characters in the story so much, because they show their inner guts, and they show the weakness in life, and whatever hinders you, and the scenes with the parents is really breathtaking in a sense, and I think everybody can identify themselves with their parents, because you all want to live up to expectations. But the thing is that you build something out of this that usually takes 10 times for a writer to find that skill in building the art. Did you do that all yourself, or were you cooperating with someone? I know it's your name on every. May I ask, just because I'm
yeah,
so
no,
fascinated?
of course. I mean, any writer who claims they did it all themselves is a liar.
Okay.
I mean, it's always a team effort. If any successful show means that there's been close collaboration with script editors and producers and directors and all the executives feeding in, heads of department, speaking to the actors. How can I know the life experiences of 20 different people from 20 different walks of life? I speak to the actors who are doing it and let them say, I'm not sure my character would say this, do this, and that's important. So whilst it's my name on the script, it's every single person on the credits at the end is involved with the script.
Okay, but you built the arc first, and then you wrote the scenes, and then you had the scenes with the actors, or how did the process go?
So the changes with the actors happened at the read-through. So I had a go first. The first scene I wrote was the end of episode 6, which isn't a standard way of writing a show, but there was a key moment in the show, which I knew it was all building up to this point, and then there'd be some fallout afterwards. And you know what I'm talking about, having watched the series, and if anyone chooses to watch the series after this, then you'll see. And it all sort of had to build up to that point. But, you know, we did 10, 12, 15 drafts, you know, of each episode. You can't
it's good
get
for
it.
us to hear.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a struggle. Yeah.
I see, I see so many, writers saying, "Oh, I just wrote it first time and it was just brilliant." And maybe they're telling the truth. I just suspect that you layer it up. I'll do a pass that's specifically focusing on one character or one theme, and layer it up, make it all interesting in 3D.
I really hope that many of you have seen it. But for those who haven't, we are now going to show the trailer of it, so you get a feeling of what it is, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So please show the trailer.
Now, delicious placenta.
Hang on, isn't this the placenta?
No, that's blood clots from inside your... That's blood clots. This is obs and gynae, also known as brats and twats. You're generally sailing the ship alone.
Are you one of the doctors?
I am the doctors.
A ship that's massive and no one's had the time to teach you how to sail. I'll come back later. I need to see someone else now.
Hopefully, hairdresser.
But other doctors can say they end up with twice the number of patients they started with.
What do we do now? I think you have to feed it for a few years, let it live in your house, and then send it to school.
Having fun there? Remember when I asked you to be an acting registrar? Can you try acting like a bloody registrar?
I'm supposed to be having a water bath.
Well, you never know, one of the pipes might come down.
Don't suppose there's anybody fucking working here today, is there?
Sorry. There's a bit less salt and towers.
I'm so sorry. Do you think I'm rubbish?
I wasn't great on my first week either.
Been here 2 months.
So, Mum, I live with Harry. I'm very happy, and we love each other. And we're gay.
Both of you?
Must be hard, maintaining a relationship.
You're gonna hate me.
How long are you gonna be? A couple hours?
12.
So, doing anything fun tonight?
Thought I'd go home 3 hours late, get shouted at, and fall asleep on the toilet.
Hold this tight.
Yeah, I can't do this.
I just feel so overwhelmed.
You gonna do something or just stand there like a bottle of fucking mayonnaise?
Crap boss, crap boyfriend, crap doctor.
So you're just gonna not let it get to you? Stiff upper labia, right?
Oh my God, where's its face?
His face is fine, just on the front of his head, not the back. Doctors, nurses, they don't do this for the money. They do it because they care. Welcome to the NHS.
Nobody cares if I die.
Oh, I don't know. The lion and the wardrobe will probably miss you.
Whatever you do, don't miss this. You want to see it. You saw it here once. I mean, there are things in this which is maybe you watch many series and so forth, but it's breaking the fourth wall is one thing. Was that in the script from the beginning?
It was in some form. So the fact I needed something to glue it to the fact that it came from diaries, and I needed what diaries offer you in a book is absolute honesty with the audience, and you're not always honest with your colleagues. And so I played with a voiceover, and I played with pieces to camera, and in various forms, very heightened. Well, like the world pauses and he continues to talk, but. Ben and Lucy Forbes, the director, gave it a very naturalistic, just sort of asides to the camera, a bit like a footnote in a book.
And you see it in some way, also another thing in this trailer, it is very much comedy, and so are your book as well. It's a way to distance yourself from it, but as it all goes on, it goes deeper and gets darker, but still with a lot of hope at the end. And I think it's very well done in those. But you mean it's a process? You spoke to the director and Ben about the fourth wall, how breaking it. But what about this? You see suddenly he sees the unborn child in the fridge or whatever, was that in the script? All those small things, which makes it so visual and so not just a talking comedy show. It goes into your heart in a sense.
And that's a good question. Well, I think one of the biggest challenges with this show, and I suspect with a lot of shows, because in the olden days there were comedies and there were dramas, and now we accept that so many things exist in this continuum between the two, and it was working out where the line fell. And you can change in fact, the show changed in the edit a lot, where we're like, change the music there to make it darker, take out this joke, or add in this joke and take the dramatic music out, come out quicker on the dramatic bit, and just finding the tone. This is a slightly unusual show, I suspect, tonally, in that it doesn't maintain the same tone straight through. There are moments that are very, very sad, and there are moments that are very, very hopefully funny, that come right together, because that was my experience of the job. I remember one day being in an antenatal clinic, seeing pregnant mum after pregnant mum, and a thing happened where I thought I must write this down when I get out of here. This is going to be a story that I tell at the pub for the next 2 years. And the next patient I see, I can't find the baby's heartbeat, and that's going to be the most devastating moment probably in this family's life. And that is just what the job is like. The gear changes are very dramatic, and it's at one point I looked at the script and thought, I think this might be an impossible part to play, because it requires such big changes in both things. And I think that's what Ben Whishaw, who plays the lead, does magically, dancing between the comedy and the drama. He does it with a very light touch, and I think he's the most extraordinary actor.
I agree on that. Was he your choice, or did he come up, or how did you get to work with him? You have to tell us already. I was going to come to this later, but
it's interesting, because who would play you in a film of your life is a common discussion, and suddenly it was like a real thing I had to think about. And for me, it was always Ben Whishaw. And I sort of could see it, and as I was writing the script, I was thinking, I can imagine Ben Whishaw doing this. I didn't know the bloke, I was just hoping. And then we brought on board a casting director, which was Nina Gold, who's one of the great British casting directors, and Martin Ware, who she works with. And we sat down for breakfast, our first meeting, and first on the list was who was going to play me, and I was excited to hear all these other names that she was going to come up with. And she said, well, it's Ben Whishaw, isn't it? So from that point onwards, we had to persuade him that, but luckily the script spoke to him, and he was not just a brilliant actor, he was just a really, really lovely man, and it was a joy to spend time with him.
At what point did you get the green light? Because you didn't get it before you written the script, right? And at what point? It's always this with producers. Many are here, and broadcasters, and so forth. Maybe they think this is too much of this or that, or could you have your vision still as a creator?
So I was in a very unusual situation because more than one broadcaster was interested. There was a slight bun fight, and the BBC greenlit it before I'd written a script, which I think is very unusual. And at the time, they said, you can make the show what you want it to be. We're not going to say, this is too disgusting, this is too dark, don't go there. Don't worry that it's on a mainstream, BBC One. And they stuck to their word, and they were the most brilliant creative partner. And then AMC came on board, and likewise, at no point were they saying, this is a bit much. In fact, often it was, can we lean into this a bit more? It's a difficult balance when you're doing a show in a hospital. You want to show the grit and the realism, so the doctors and nurses who watch it go, yeah, that's what it's like. And also, you don't want every single member of the audience to switch off because it makes them feel nauseous.
So were there ever a veto against any scenes? Or did anyone say, oh, where's the final cut? Was that on your part, or was it a discussion ever on any scenes?
They gave notes, but their notes were good storytelling notes.
Okay,
it was never don't go there, and it felt like a great creative partnership, and it was, to be honest, as a writer, it was a dream.
This sounds fantastic, because I feel sometimes today that you move into a situation where everything is being pitched, and you need to have, we have to have that star, it has to be a high concept, it has to be this and that, and then you have the right mix, which is usually don't, because you need the heart, and you had the big heart in this, and that's what's shown, I think.
I'm glad you think so. It's sort of, to me, it had to feel like a true representation. I wanted my doctor friends to watch it and see themselves in it, because I thought if I got that right, then hopefully it would speak to an audience.
So now, what your doctor friends, what do they say about the series? Are they with you? I mean, I've read somewhere in some paper that some parents said, I never want my children to become doctors anymore. Is that how has this affected the world of doctors? There will be no more doctors in the future?
I don't think there'll be no more doctors. I think that before you go into a profession like medicine, you should do so with your eyes wide open. And I think you should read books like mine or shows like this. And I've had people write to me directly saying, my daughter read your book and she wanted to be a doctor, now she doesn't want you to be a doctor. And my answer is always the same, which is, if that book's going to put you off medicine, then medicine is really going to put you off medicine. Let's, show it like it is. I've had very interesting responses from doctors. Some doctors, in fact, have said it was too true to life, and they found it triggering and sort of stirred up sort of memories they thought they'd packed away. I had a lot of doctors get in touch saying before this they thought they were the only doctor who'd ever cried in the locker room. Because in medicine, there's this culture of, you're a bloody doctor, you bloody get on with it, stiff upper lip, stiff drink, all that. And actually, when something bad happens and you find yourself crying in the toilets, it's very isolating, thinking that you're the only person that's ever happened. There's a lot of people saying they now feel more empowered to talk about this stuff. It talks very openly about suicides in doctors. In the UK, one doctor takes their own life every 3 weeks. And I think that's an absolute tragedy, and it should be a front page every time it happens, but it's just never, it's taboo, it was never talked about. And so it brought that to the front and center, and I think a lot of the comments I've had from doctors are, talking positively about that, and also the fact that it helps their friends and their family understand, why they always cancel 30 minutes before drinks. It isn't because they hate their friends, it's because, the next doctor hasn't shown up, or there's an emergency on the labor ward and they're having to stay for an extra couple of hours.
And this is kind of beyond the creative point of Adam Kay, but if you had 3 ideas for an NHS to change the system, what would it be?
That's very easy. More money, and more money. The NHS, I think, is the most perfect model for a healthcare system. I'm not saying it's the most perfect healthcare system, but the model is so pure. It's free at the point of access, no matter what your bank balance. You'll be treated exactly the same. It's based on your clinical need. And that's paid for by taxpayers. And there was a period of 10 years where it became hugely underfunded, where a government decided that a government who potentially had lots of friends who worked in private healthcare weren't so interested in the NHS, and it became really, really, really stretched. And then just at its most stretched, a global pandemic arrived, and there was no fuel in the tank. And money is going in now for COVID reasons, but to get it back on an even keel, it needs more money, because more money means more staff. There are almost 100,000 staff vacancies in the NHS, and I don't know what organisation each of you work in, but if 100,000 people are off sick, it would really affect your workload. And so the doctors who are working, and the nurses and the midwives and the ambulance drivers and the paramedics and the pharmacists, they're all doing multiple people's jobs, and that's unsustainable. And so we need more staff in. We need an environment where fewer staff leave. We need more resources to cut down the waiting list. And all of those come back to money.
So, and this leads us in a sense to part of these days are about what impact can TV series have on lives and on society and so forth. Do you believe that you have an impact? And what has NHS said about this? What are the reactions? Are they saying, oh my God, Adam Kay is right, we'll put in more money? Or do you think TV series can change and have an impact?
I think they should. I think we all, when we're working on a project, need to have it shouldn't just be something funny or something silly. I think at its heart, you need to have, even if it's a small thing, you need to have, this is what I want to achieve with it. And, I would be, I would be bananas if I claimed that I can have more impact as a writer than I can as a doctor working on labour ward. The arts have enormous value, but clearly it's very different to saving a baby's life. You'd have to have quite the ego as a writer to think that was the same. But I have seen some real-world impact. Shortly after This Is Going to Hurt, the book came out, I was invited to speak to the Secretary of State for Health, the Minister for Health, and he said to me a very similar question to you. If I could make one change, he was fairly new in the job. He said, if I could make one change, what would that be?
I said 3. I said 3.
Your question was better, obviously, but I only answered one. And the answer, of course, is money, but if I sit there and say you need to put in £2 billion, he's just not going to do. So the night before my meeting, I was performing in a theatre, not unlike this in the West End in London. And in my dressing room, there was a poster that said, Theatre Helpline. If you have any stresses or problems at home or at work about money or whatever it is, phone this number, it's free, 24 hours a day. And I said to him, there is no such poster in any hospital. There is nowhere for these doctors and nurses to turn. And he said, that's very interesting. It doesn't sound right. I think you just don't know, what this service is. And then one of his underlings got in touch with me a few weeks later saying, yeah, we've checked and there is no such service. And following this, he puts a bunch of money into a service that used to be just for GPs in London, made it for all doctors all across the country, that exact service, so they can phone and get help if they're struggling. And when he announced this, he mentioned my book. And, you mentioned before, it sold this many copies, it's in this number of languages. That's great. But at the same time, I'm much more proud of what it did in practical terms for staff, because that's making a difference.
That's good. My wife, when she comes home and had a bad day at the hospital, she goes out in the garden, takes care of the flower and let things fall off. What did you do when you came home?
I wrote my diaries and had a glass of white wine, and neither of those are enough. And your wife's approach, it works for her, but it doesn't work as well as speaking about what happened at work. And there's a repeated thing in this show where anytime the character of Adam comes home and his friend or his partner asks, how was work? He goes, fine, thanks, which is what I did every single time. How was your day? Yeah, fine, thanks, because it's easier to say fine, thanks than actually say, you know what, it was awful.
Yeah. I tried to ask that question to my wife, but it's
ingrained. It's very difficult to unlearn
yes,
that.
And now, as being the creative guy you are, and you're sitting struggling with things, you don't struggle, you just write, and it's great. No, but do you still take a glass of wine to get your creativity boosted? How do you do? What's the trick?
I think it's different for every writer. For me, I only write at night. I don't know why. I think I'm very distractible. And so, Facebook and Twitter need to have gone to bed, and the email stops pinging, and I wander around downstairs. I think I'm sort of motion activated, so I wander around and think, and then I think of something and I write it down, and I keep wandering, and but that's what I do.
You're a night writer, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm a doctor. I can be awake any time, day or night. I'm well trained.
Like being on call.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm a director mostly, so may I ask, at what point did the director come in, and how did your work with the director, you mentioned it a little, how did it work, your cooperation, and did you inspire each other also?
Yeah, I'm not a visualist. I don't think in terms of a beautiful shot or an amazing scene. And Lucy Forbes was the director of the first block, came on very early. She'd done In My Skin, which was BAFTA winning, and a second series, End of the Fucking World, for Netflix, which I thought was brilliant. And they're both great storytelling, but they're also beautiful. And Lucy had this enormous challenge of how do you make something at the same time a realistic hospital that looks like a real hospital, not some glossy non-NHS thing. It had to look true and underfunded, and at the same time visually different to the 20,000 other medical shows, and somehow beautiful. And I don't know how she did it. Her and Benedict Spence, the DOP, found this beautiful color palette, and I mean, she's brilliant. And Tom Kingsley was the director in the second block, who took those building blocks and did also some brilliant things. And anytime a lot of time the director says, can we rewrite this scene so it can be more this? And the answer is always yes, because it's a different skill set. I would have to have a huge ego to think that I know better than a director about how to make something look.
What that rewriting process with the director, was that before they started shooting, or was that actually 2 days before they're going to shoot a scene, or was it, how many scenes did you work with? Because it's so cleverly made, everything, so it feels like it's a director somewhere there.
There's a lot of director. I mean, Lucy, fed in sets of notes, half a dozen times, and they're all the director, the executives, the channel all feed in. They're collated together, and luckily on this project they mostly agreed rather than disagreed. Sometimes you get like 2 sets of notes and they absolutely contradict each other. And you're like, well, what do I do here? But everyone was on the same page. So it was mostly fairly locked down before we shot. However, on the day when something doesn't quite work, I was always on the end of a phone.
But you were never on set, may I ask?
I was never on set. This was during COVID. I mean, a writer on set is as useful as having like a lobster on set. It's like, but it's okay. We just sort of get in the way, but COVID meant that we could see the monitor at home. So there was a bit of tech called Q-Take. I'm sure there's other similar things, and it was broadcast from the monitor to every exec's iPad. And so I would watch a rehearsal, and then I would just, leave them to it, hopefully. But if, any of the cast were, you know what it is, sometimes it just doesn't fit their mouth, and they're stumbling over the line, or someone, thinks there's a gap for a joke, or, a line that I've written that's 6 words and it now needs to cover a walk down a 300-meter corridor, then I just sort of type it and it.
They sent you texts and saying, help us out, and you
or phone me up, and because it isn't finished until it goes on telly. And even here's a fun thing. This is very unusual. So we had an episode that came in about a minute and a half short.
Well, that's bad. That's really difficult. It's easier if it's too long.
Too long is great.
Too short is terrible.
I think you always make things better by shortening it, because particularly in comedy, I was taught fast is funny, and I think that's often true. Just keep it moving. It's a quite relentless show because we're showing a stressful doctor's job, and so that needs energy and pace.
It happened to me once in a Beck movie. It was 2 minutes too short. Oof. And you had to prolong some scenes. You couldn't reshoot, and it was I cried because you don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that. So and we were like, oh, where can we find the extra? You don't want a flabby show. You want it, and then I think I don't know if it was Lucy, the director, or producer, who said, we have huge numbers of shots of people operating wearing masks. We could just steal some shots and have any dialogue, and no one would ever know. And so, ADR, additional dialogue recording, we constructed a whole minute and a half scene, and it was actually something we talked about and regretted not putting in the script, and we just did it, and no one would know. So that's the advantage. I think next show I do, everyone's going to be wearing masks all the time. Maybe I'll do a COVID show, so 100% of the cast are in masks.
There's always an exit somewhere, reuse. I said I love the performance of Ben Whishaw. He's absolutely a super talent and so smart and so good, and he's one of the rising stars of actors in Great Britain for the moment. But you also had Ambika Mod as Shruti, and she's also excellent. But this is her first role. You have to tell us about how you found her.
I had nothing to do with finding
her. She's the doctor to become a doctor, whatever you call it.
Yeah, so she's Adam's junior, and she's very, very new, working on the ward. She's out of her depth. Adam is treated horribly. He treats her horribly. We see how this gets perpetuated. Her performance is absolutely mesmerizing. I think she's extraordinary, and it's all credit to the casting directors who. We'd seen quite a few tapes of actors, and everyone was good, but no one had the sort of the spark that we were looking for, the specific thing for this role. And then we kept saying, "Oh, do you mind looking a bit further?" And Ambika was in a comedy sketch act, and I think had essentially done no performing on telly before, and we saw her on tape, and everyone just knew she was a star, and in fact, unusually for a TV show, it was shot in scene order, because most of the show is in a hospital set that we built, and so we that wasn't a consideration. This set we've only got for 3 more days. So
every scene order for the whole series. Oh, I mean, each block or whatever.
Pretty much.
I think Bridges over Madison County was done like that, but otherwise you never ever do that because it's too costly to move back and forth. But you built the set, so 90% was shot in this set.
So all of those bits could pretty much happen in, with some exceptions.
So sorry, I interrupted you. You were talking about her performance there in the beginning. Yes.
But what that meant is that she starts off the series as a rabbit in the headlights, in this impossibly difficult job, huge responsibility, not knowing what she's doing, everyone's being horrible to her. And at the same time, real Ambika It's pretty much her first time on camera. It's her and Ben Whishaw. It's a stressful time. And Lucy was saying that she didn't even let them socialize much before they started shooting. Not too much rehearsal. Definitely don't go for coffee. So that it would capture that raw sort of stress and nervous energy. And I mean, she has got an amazing career ahead of her. She's just been cast. It was announced in a Netflix production of One Day, the David Nichols book that was previously the Anne Hathaway film, taking the lead there. And I mean, I can't wait to see what she does next.
Yeah, she's a rising star, that's for sure. And she made it here. May I ask about your thing? I read somewhere that you were on set saying, maybe not on set, but on your distant thing, saying that a doctor doesn't do that, it does this, and they almost got crazy with you because you were so keen on, which is good, of course, having it right. Was it so?
I didn't want it to be the show where someone wrote in to say, I enjoyed the show, but why did this midwife hold this baby like that? So everything medical had to be right, whether it was the poster on the wall or the way someone holds a swab. And to that end, I wasn't there on set, but every single scene, if there was a doctor there, an obstetrician, I needed to have a working obstetrician on the set advising. If there's a midwife, I need a midwife. If there's a theatre scrub nurse, I need the theatre scrub nurse. And in fact, some of the extras, like the supporting artists, like if we need an anaesthetist in the background, we realized it was easier to get a real anaesthetist to fiddle with the machine like he would in real life than train someone up to do it. So actually, a lot of the extras are medically qualified.
I made a series called The Restaurant, and when you're going to shoot, I mean, you have to rush from the first day. So I had to train the people that are going to act in the kitchen or the servants to be real servants and be really persons when working in the kitchens. Did you do the same with the actors? Did they have to be on a ward? Did they have to know how to handle things? Did they go with doctors to practice before you started first shooting?
Yeah, good question. I mean, if it wasn't for COVID, I think they would have spent time shadowing on a natural ward. However, every actor who was going to do like a cesarean or a forceps or ventouse delivery, anything like that, got trained the same way that actual doctors are. So we put them on the same kind of course. So Ben Whishaw, Amber Commod could have a pretty good go at a cesarean section.
How long was he there? I mean,
I think it was like a day of intensive training with a working obstetrician, showing them, this is how you hold it. And also, we cheated a bit because we realized that given we had the actual surgeons, in a surgical scene, if we're just seeing a close-up on the hands tying knots, because it's all very fiddly, it's all sort of... we just got the medical people, the medical experts to do some of that, so... bit of cheating.
How many bellies did you produce before? Been a stack of them.
The prosthetics we took very seriously. There was an amazing company called Millennium FX who did it all, and we just wanted it to be right. Because something I noticed, watching TV shows where there are babies, is a baby's born, and then suddenly they're holding this like 5-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
For understandable reasons.
Teenager, yeah.
Yeah, it's like they've already got they're already halfway to university, and a lot of the show revolves around a very premature baby who's born in stressful situations, and they made these extremely realistic models of these very premature babies so it could grow and grow and grow and grow, and then pediatric experts would come to set and sort of make sure the right tubes are in the right, the baby was looking exactly as it would. But for the normal babies, the babies born at 40 weeks, turns out there's a casting agency who provide you with babies who are 1 or 2 days old. And so
Can they promise a deliverance of it? Can they promise that they really will have it?
Yes, because you, if you know you're shooting on Wednesday, you get a bunch of mums who are due to deliver on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and and they have to text you, when they've had the baby, and you're like, thanks very much, and then they come. It's the first IMDb credit.
Fantastic! I never heard of that. That's lovely to hear. But also on the prosthetics bellies, they brought out some children, but they were just fake babies then. But no real operational pictures, or?
No, no, we didn't actually hack into any women.
No.
We thought that was too much. So that was all prosthetics.
You couldn't order that, no.
Interestingly, the medical experts, every time they came in, if we brought someone new in, if they were looking at one of our fake operations, they all said it's exactly. They said it's more realistic than the models that they trained on when they were doing medicine, because these people put, the body's basically made up of lots of layers, and they got them exactly right, and it really layers that actually bleed when you cut through it, and little things that spurt. It was amazing.
And it gives you intensity, which is so important for this, and also. But I'm thinking about his kind of nightmarish feeling. The main character Adam. Is this really reflecting your? Is this? May I ask personally? Is this you very much, or can you identify really on the down to the core of the story there?
So, my medical career ended in a different way to what we show in this. I had this terrible experience. We give the lead character here, Adam, a terrible experience at the end of his first episode, and we show how he deals with it or fails to deal with it as the series goes by. But I stole a lot of my feelings in real life having left medicine. I used to wake up in the middle of the night, in a cold sweat, as if I was back in the operating theatre, my pulse going 200 beats a minute, and we discussed a lot how to bring in those flashes of, whether it's PTSD or whatever it is, just unwanted thoughts, coming in. And I think it's very difficult to describe how it feels to have moments like that. But I think Lucy and Tom, the directors, did a great job of representing those thoughts.
I agree. It's very well done. I feel Adam's feelings in it, and it is as bad as it is, as you say, and you identify and you think it's correct. And I sometimes, when I been out shooting and I didn't get the shot because the sun was going down or something broke down or the mic went into picture, whatever, and I'm coming home and say to my wife, it's terrible, I didn't get that last shot. And she said, I lost 2 patients today. And you go, okay, whatever. Shall we have something to eat?
Yeah, nothing compares to the stakes of working in medicine. And now, any time I have a bad day at work, now, if you start throwing cans at me or everyone puts their hand up and say how much they hate the show, whatever, fine, life goes on. Once you've done those shifts where the unthinkable happens, there's no such thing as an emergency after that.
I see we're getting short of time, but we'll soon take some questions from the audience. So if you have something in mind, formulate that for yourself, and you will have the chance to ask Adam about it. Was this a success in the press? And it's out now. Did you get a good audience and so forth? How did it work out?
Yeah, I was blown away by the reception. It got 8 million people for the first episode between BBC One plus the iPlayer for the next however many weeks it is, 2 weeks, which I think that's a lot of people, and it's just going out on AMC Plus at the moment in the States, and they said that on Metacritic it's the highest rated new drama this year, which is
8.4 on IMDb, I saw.
Okay, I'll take that.
High figure.
And it's, I don't read reviews, really, because I think that's a very good way to go insane. And it's also, what am I going to do with this knowledge? I can't change it, so it doesn't,
So the question is, are they on you for, I know you quit the job as a doctor, but Adam in the story is still there. Do they want another season?
I wrote it to be a single series. We were saying before, just before the session, that all I know about how to tell a story is it's got a beginning and a middle and an end. And I wrote this series with a beginning and a middle and an end. And I'm not this sort of clever writer who can think about how this is the start of a multi-season. So I left the character the way I wanted to leave it. Never say never, but at the same time, probably never.
But then my last questions before we let the audience in is, they say that everybody can do one story, the one about his life. That's not true, because it's really difficult to do it, and you've done it in a fantastic way. But has this process of writing a television drama on your own life made you a better dramatic writer for your next project coming up, understanding the arc and the structure?
Absolutely. Every single job I've done as a writer has taught me something. And when I'm choosing my next thing to work on, one of the questions I ask, I'm very lucky, but people are approaching me wanting me to do various things, but the question I ask is, am I going to learn from this? And another reason not to do a second series of this is I don't know what more I'd get out of it. You know, I've learned from these brilliant producers and executives and directors. I want new challenges. I think that everything I've worked on has been very different to the last thing, and the thing I'm brewing at the moment will be extremely different to this, but hopefully will challenge or entertain or inform in a different way.
Sounds great. So may I ask, are there any questions? We have a few minutes left from the audience. Please come ahead and ask Adam. There's one. Yes, yes, please. Can we have a mic to the woman in green?
After seeing the series, I've had 2 kids, but I don't want to take a cesarean again, I tell you something. It was amazing, it was a great show, I'm impressed. I want to ask you, your next step, what is it going to be about your doctor life too, or is it going to be about something totally different? You were a little bit into it right now.
So I've got another book coming out at the end of this year, which is it's a sequel to This Is Going to Hurt in a way, but also a prequel, because I've told all my best stories from being in the hospital, and I've explored that, I think, in the way that I wanted to. Something I've never really talked about before was going back into medical school, how we train up our doctors. Are we training them the right way? Are we choosing the right people to train? And I'm also looking in this book at what happened after I left and what medicine did to me as a person and what I'm like when I get ill and things like that. And basically talking about how medicine fucked me up. And so my next project, sort of in an oblique way, is going to deal with some of that. But again, on the comedy to drama spectrum, I'm wanting to do something that still has a heart to it, but allows me to do some of the jokes I thought of that I couldn't chuck into that one.
Thank you.
All right. Any more questions from the audience, please?
Hello, Adam. Thank you very much for sharing your journey. I was wondering if you could say something about your process of adapting your book to a story for the screen, how you went about that.
So I was very lucky as the person adapting it, because I'd also written it. So I could be very, very brave in what I did to it. So the book starts in my first day as a doctor pretty much and takes me all the way through to my final day. I decided I wanted to zoom in on basically like 30 pages of the book, and all of the decisions I made that were the most successful were often the boldest decisions looking back at it in terms of like characters that I decided to invent. And I've talked to a couple of people recently about adapting existing properties, which is the more usual way of going about it. And I have realized that in order to make it interesting, sometimes you have to do a very unexpected, make the very unexpected choices. So I think my main thing I've learned is just be brave. And if that means, you know, setting great expectations on the moon, and that is the only way that, you know, that's the way that you see it, then go ahead and, you know, and sort of put everyone in a spaceship. So, I mean, that's, but I don't think there's any one-size-fits-all process for an adaptation. It's about keeping the soul of the original, and then often adaptations, I think, can be bland if they stick too rigidly, because they're totally different art forms, writing it as a book or a graphic novel or whatever it is, and then seeing it as a movie or seeing it as a TV show. So be prepared to, you know, to sort of break the spine of the book and do something interesting. I think that's the... Also, there's no... Writing advice is very... It's very dodgy, isn't it? Because everyone disagrees with each other. When I first had the publisher first said, we want you to write a book, I'd previously gone up on stage and read out from my diaries, and a publisher said, we think that could be a book. And I sort of said, okay. And then I read 4 or 5 books about how to write a book, and they all totally disagreed with each other. The only piece of advice that I saw that I thought that makes sense is there was an English writer a long time ago called Somerset Maugham, and he said, there are 3 rules to writing a novel. Unfortunately, no one knows what they are.
Good question, and a very good answer.
Thank you.
And my final, if there's one lesson you've done during this, the hardest part during this, is there one of those that you can share to the audience that we shouldn't, the same mistake we shouldn't do?
The thing I learned, which is just very, very painful, is that it does get better with subsequent drafts. It takes so long to write a draft, and then notes are so painful because you know that means throwing stuff away. And you know, the production company were very, you know, they were very keen on having, you know, they said at the start, you know, this is going to need another 8 drafts, and you do not want to hear that. But they were right. And what I learned is that if I've just finished writing it, and they, you know, send me their notes 3 days later, that's a very bad time to do a redraft, because I remember how many hours I poured into doing that, and I didn't want to throw them away. But if I did a redraft at that point, I wouldn't change it enough. If I left it a week or so, 2 weeks, went away, did something different, even a different project, and then came back, I would do a much better next draft because I had a bit of distance. So not everyone's notes are going to be right. You know, trust yourself. It needs to have, you know, one person at the heart of it. But yeah, it does. Annoyingly, there is a correlation between numbers of drafts and quality of output.
Dear Adam, it's been great having you here and telling us about your creative journey during this, and showing your inner gut, your inner placenta, no, your inner guts in giving birth to these stories. It's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you.